Africa, a land of abundance, resilience, and complexity, flourished long before colonial influences. Vast kingdoms like the Mali Empire under Mansa Musa ruled with wisdom and wealth. Ancient Egypt developed groundbreaking systems of writing, architecture, and science. Across the continent, cultures celebrated diversity. Rich traditions in music, dance, and storytelling created a unique identity. Traditional African societies valued communal living, emphasizing unity, respect for elders, and the stewardship of nature. Natural resources, from gold to salt, fueled thriving trade routes with Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Africa was not merely the dark continent as often depicted. It was an illuminated hub of knowledge and innovation. But cracks existed. Tribal loyalties, though a source of strength, sometimes bred divisions. Over time, these divisions would be exploited. The 15th century brought the Portuguese, Dutch, British, and French. These European powers, driven by the promise of wealth and the allure of new territories, embarked on ambitious voyages across the seas. Their ships, laden with dreams of conquest and riches, arrived on African shores, marking the beginning of a tumultuous era. The arrival of these explorers was not just a moment in history, it was the start of a profound transformation that would reshape the continent in unimaginable ways. The scramble for Africa wasn't just territorial, it was a theft of identity. European powers, in their quest for dominance, carved up the continent with little regard for the people who lived there. They seized artifacts, symbols of rich and diverse cultures, and redrew maps to suit their own interests. This arbitrary division of land disregarded the intricate tapestry of ethnicities, languages, and traditions that had existed for centuries. Colonizers redrew boundaries without understanding ethnic or cultural realities, sowing seeds of conflict. These new borders often split communities and forced together groups with long histories of rivalry. The consequences of these actions were far-reaching, creating tensions that would persist long after the colonizers had left. The legacy of these artificial boundaries is still felt today, as many African nations continue to grapple with the divisions imposed upon them. Exploitation of resources like diamonds, gold, and rubber fueled European empires, while Africa's people were enslaved and uprooted. The wealth extracted from African soil built grand cities and funded industrial revolutions in Europe, but it came at a tremendous human cost. Entire communities were displaced and countless lives were lost in the brutal pursuit of profit. The scars of this exploitation are still visible in the landscapes and societies of Africa today. Education systems prioritized European languages and ideologies, sidelining indigenous knowledge. Colonial schools were designed to produce a workforce that could serve the needs of the colonizers, rather than to empower African children with their own rich heritage. This imposition of foreign values and languages eroded the cultural foundations of many communities, creating a sense of disconnection and loss that would be felt for generations. Kings and queens, once revered, were either co-opted into colonial governance or disempowered entirely. Traditional leaders who had once held the respect and loyalty of their people found themselves marginalized or manipulated by the new colonial authorities. Some were forced to collaborate, while others were stripped of their power and influence. This undermining of traditional authority structures further destabilized African societies, making it easier for the colonizers to maintain control. The idea of sovereignty eroded. Religious influence followed suit. As colonial powers imposed their rule, they also sought to reshape the spiritual landscape of Africa. Treaties were signed under duress, and flags were raised to signify the loss of autonomy. The imposition of foreign religions often accompanied these political changes, further eroding the cultural and spiritual sovereignty of African communities. While Christianity and Islam had long histories in parts of Africa, colonial missionaries often disrespected traditional African religions, calling them primitive. These missionaries, armed with a sense of superiority, sought to convert Africans to their faiths, often by denigrating and dismissing the rich spiritual traditions that had existed for millennia. This religious colonization added another layer of cultural disruption, as many Africans were pressured to abandon their ancestral beliefs. Colonialism reshaped African economies to benefit European powers. The economic systems that had sustained African societies for generations were dismantled and replaced with ones designed to extract maximum value for the colonizers. African labor was exploited to produce raw materials that were shipped to Europe, leaving the continent impoverished and dependent on foreign markets. Infrastructure was built, not for Africans, but to move goods from the mines and plantations to European markets. Railways, ports, and roads were constructed with the primary aim of facilitating the extraction and export of resources. While these projects did bring some development, they were not intended to benefit the local populations. Instead, they served to entrench the economic exploitation and ensure the smooth flow of wealth out of Africa. A continent of self-sufficient societies became one of dependence. Before the arrival of the colonizers, African communities had developed complex systems of agriculture, trade, and governance that allowed them to thrive. Colonialism disrupted these systems, creating economies that were dependent on the export of raw materials and the import of manufactured goods. This shift left many African nations vulnerable to global market fluctuations and reliant on foreign aid, a legacy that continues to shape the continent's economic landscape today. The mid-20th century ignited flames of independence. Figures like Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, Jomo Kenyatta in Kenya, and Patrice Lumumba in the Congo called for self-rule. Many believed independence would reverse the damage of colonialism. But liberation came with a cost. Borders drawn by colonizers remained, forcing tribes and ethnic groups with historical tensions to coexist. In some cases, this led to tribalism, which replaced colonial favoritism with local nepotism. Global superpowers fueled proxy wars during the Cold War, turning African nations into battlegrounds for ideological supremacy. Leaders who spoke of unity and progress often faced coups or assassination. The promise of freedom dimmed under the weight of corruption and mismanagement. Today, Africa remains a paradox. It is a continent of immense potential and rich cultural heritage, yet it faces numerous challenges that hinder its progress. From the bustling markets of Lagos to the serene landscapes of the Serengeti, Africa is a land of contrasts. It is a continent of vast resources: oil in Nigeria, cobalt in the Congo, and fertile lands stretching from east to west. These resources have the potential to transform the continent, providing wealth and opportunities for millions. However, the management and distribution of these resources remain a significant challenge, yet many African nations still rely on foreign aid. Why? Despite the abundance of natural resources, the benefits often do not reach the average citizen. Instead, they are siphoned off by corrupt officials and multinational corporations, leaving the majority of the population in poverty. 1. Corruption and nepotism. Public funds often line the pockets of a few elites. This corruption undermines public trust and diverts resources away from essential services like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. The result is a cycle of poverty and underdevelopment that is difficult to break. Nepotism undermines meritocracy, slowing progress. When jobs and opportunities are given based on connections rather than ability, it stifles innovation and discourages talented individuals from striving for excellence. This has long-term implications for the development of a skilled and motivated workforce. 2. Political instability. Many leaders cling to power, stifling democracy. This often leads to unrest and violence as citizens demand their rights and freedoms. Political instability also deters investment and disrupts economic activities, further hindering development. Free speech is curtailed and elections are manipulated. In many countries, the media is controlled by the state, and dissenting voices are silenced. This lack of transparency and accountability erodes the foundations of democracy and makes it difficult for citizens to hold their leaders accountable. 3. Health crises. Diseases like malaria, HIV/AIDS, and Ebola continue to challenge healthcare systems. These diseases not only cause immense suffering, but also place a heavy burden on already strained healthcare systems. Efforts to combat these diseases are often hampered by a lack of resources and infrastructure. Limited access to clean water and sanitation exacerbates preventable illnesses. In many rural areas, people have to walk long distances to fetch water, which is often contaminated. This leads to outbreaks of waterborne diseases, which are preventable with proper infrastructure and sanitation. 4. Education gaps. Colonial-era education systems persist, prioritizing rote learning over innovation. This outdated approach to education does not equip students with the skills they need to thrive in a modern economy. As a result, many young Africans are unable to find meaningful employment, even with degrees. Many young Africans struggle to find jobs even with degrees. The mismatch between the education system and the job market means that graduates often lack the practical skills and experience that employers are looking for. This contributes to high levels of youth unemployment and underemployment. 5. Western influence. Neo-colonialism through unfair trade deals, debt traps, and exploitative industries keeps Africa dependent. These practices often benefit foreign companies and governments at the expense of local economies and communities. The result is a cycle of dependency that is difficult to break. Foreign companies often extract resources with little benefit to locals. The environmental impact of these activities is also significant, leading to deforestation, pollution, and loss of biodiversity. This not only affects the health and livelihoods of local communities, but also has long-term implications for the sustainability of the continent's natural resources. 6. Tribal and ethnic conflicts. Issues like Rwanda's genocide in 1994 and ongoing clashes in places like Sudan highlight the deep scars of colonial borders. These conflicts often have deep historical roots and are exacerbated by competition for resources and political power. They cause immense suffering and displacement, and their resolution requires a deep understanding of the underlying issues and a commitment to peace and reconciliation. By Africans themselves. 1. Good governance. Africans need accountable leaders who prioritize public welfare over personal gain. This means leaders who are transparent in their actions, who listen to the needs of their people, and who are committed to building a better future for all. Good governance is not just about making the right decisions, but also about creating an environment where citizens feel empowered to participate in the political process. It's about ensuring that the rule of law is upheld and that corruption is rooted out at all levels of government. Transparency in government spending and strong institutions are key. When governments are transparent, citizens can hold them accountable. This means publishing budgets, making procurement processes open, and ensuring that public funds are used for their intended purposes. Strong institutions, such as independent judiciaries and robust anti-corruption agencies, are essential for maintaining this transparency and accountability. 2. Education reform. African curricula should emphasize critical thinking, entrepreneurship, and local knowledge. Education is the foundation of any society, and in Africa, it must be tailored to meet the unique needs and challenges of the continent. This means moving away from rote learning and encouraging students to think critically and creatively. It also means incorporating local knowledge and traditions into the curriculum so that students can see the relevance of their education to their own lives and communities. A focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, can fuel innovation. By prioritizing STEM education, African countries can equip their young people with the skills they need to compete in the global economy. This includes not only technical skills, but also the ability to think critically and solve complex problems. Innovation is key to economic growth, and a strong STEM education system can help drive this innovation. 3. Pan-African unity. Regional integration, like the African Continental Free Trade Area, can boost trade within Africa and reduce dependence on external markets. By working together, African countries can create a larger, more competitive market that can attract investment and drive economic growth. This means not only reducing trade barriers, but also improving infrastructure and harmonizing regulations to make it easier for businesses to operate across borders. 4. Gender equality. Empowering women through education and economic opportunities can unlock untapped potential. Women make up half of the population, and their full participation in the economy is essential for sustainable development. This means not only providing girls with access to education, but also ensuring that women have the skills and opportunities they need to succeed in the workforce. It also means addressing social and cultural barriers that prevent women from fully participating in society. By global superpowers. 1. Fair trade. Western nations must renegotiate exploitative contracts, ensuring Africa gets a fair share of its resource wealth. For too long, Africa's resources have been extracted and exported with little benefit to the local population. Fair trade means ensuring that African countries receive a fair price for their resources and that the benefits of resource extraction are shared more equitably. This includes not only renegotiating contracts, but also supporting local value addition and processing industries. 2. Debt relief. Canceling unfair debts can give African nations a fresh start. Many African countries are burdened with debt that was incurred under unfair or exploitative terms. Canceling this debt can free up resources that can be used for development and poverty reduction. It can also help to restore economic stability and create a more favorable environment for investment. 3. Support for local industries. Instead of flooding African markets with cheap imports, global powers should invest in local production. This means supporting the development of local industries and businesses so that African countries can produce more of what they need domestically. It also means providing technical assistance and investment to help these industries grow and become more competitive. By trading partners. 1. Technology transfer. Sharing knowledge and technology can help Africa build its own industries. This means not only providing access to new technologies, but also building the capacity of local businesses and entrepreneurs to use and adapt these technologies. It also means fostering partnerships between African and international companies to facilitate the transfer of knowledge and skills. 2. Climate action. The world must support Africa in mitigating the effects of climate change, which disproportionately affects the continent. This means providing financial and technical assistance to help African countries adapt to the impacts of climate change and transition to more sustainable forms of energy. It also means supporting efforts to protect and restore Africa's natural ecosystems, which are vital for the health and well-being of the continent's people and wildlife. Africa's future lies in its people. With the youngest population globally, the continent holds immense potential. Imagine an Africa where leaders prioritize education, healthcare, and unity, where technology bridges the gap between urban and rural areas, where wildlife and natural beauty are preserved for generations. The world must see Africa not as a charity case, but as an equal partner, and Africans must rise to demand better for themselves and their children. This story isn't just about Africa's past, it's about a future that respects the continent's diversity and humanity. Change is possible, but it requires effort from every corner of the globe.